Hello, everyone. Um, how's it going? First stream since I got COVID. Um, so my voice in my throat is still a little bit tight, still a little bit not 100% there. Uh, but I wanted to stream again, so I will try to stream again. Also, for some reason, I'm unable to hear my own music. So, hooray! What is going on? Mm, Like, I'm able to hear my browser normally, but this time around, for some reason, it decided, you know what? No music for you. Mm, I can see the music happening in my OBS. Oops, and if I turn it up or down, it doesn't change anything on my end. Don't you just love it when you get problems like this in the middle of stream? I mean, I don't have to listen to my own music, I guess, but it would be nice. Unless you're telling me, no, my headphones still work. Still hear sounds in general. Oh my goodness. It's just always the same. It's like, yay, I'm uh starting off stream with troubleshooting tech. Oh my goodness. Um Browser audio. I can listen to it through OBS if I turn on the monitoring, but that's not ideal, but I'll have to deal with it for now, I guess. Okay. Okay. So, uh let me turn it down a little bit. Okay. So, TTRPGs, let's go. How long ago was this? 2 weeks? 3 weeks? I don't remember. I think I had 1 week in between where I couldn't stream, and then another week with COVID, so quite a bit of time. Let's see what we had. We were in the middle of designing an OSR type old school Renaissance type game. All right, so what do we have as design goals? We had, let me get this into a size I'm comfortable with. There we go. A low-powered fantasy adventure game where PCs explore the wilderness or delve dungeons. The world is dangerous, so cleverness trumps brute force. This, in general, is the OSR, or the core of the OSR mindset, or OSR philosophy. There's more to it, of course. Um, Hold on. But in general, this is it. Okay. Then, what else do we have? We have how is the game about that? And I've been thinking a lot about this over the past 2-3 weeks. Disincentivize combat, yes, that's one thing. Combat gives no direct reward, and combat is lethal and dangerous. Create avenues for player ingenuity. This I can do more mechanically. Attrition, very important. This shows the danger. So let's put in some comments on what each part does or what I need to look out for. So, yeah, create avenues like enforce, and with enforce I mean I need to design enforce for me as the designer, right? Enforce mechanically. Attrition is the mounting danger, right? Robust systems for exploration and delving. So this is I want these systems to be player facing so that players see that there are systems happening so that they can make uh, choices with clear consequences. And also, of course, helps the GM. What do the characters do? Right, go out on adventures. This is very very vague. This needs something better. But this is also I discovered kind of tied to the setting. The setting can do a lot of heavy lifting here. What kinds of behaviors does the game incentivize? Not rushing into combat or danger. That's covered by the lethal combat system. Planning your trips because of the attrition, resource management, and exploration. And then what do the players do? Try to use the environment plus tools to cleverly overcome obstacles, inventory management, and then play towards the PC's personal goal. This is something I need to implement, but that requires some sort of setting. And there are multiple possible ones. Right. Other considerations, we have mechanical systems. So these are structures, right? Scenario structures and game structures for various different activities: exploration, dungeon delving, downtime, and so on. Combat is, of course, a big one as well. Allow for sandboxy play, as in a player driven narrative, and GM tools on preparing and running the game. Then allow for failing forward with grades of success and not necessarily have one action be one check. This is mainly in combat, right? Because in a lot of games, D&D being on the forefront of this, one check, one roll of the dice is something as small as a single sword swing, right? And that is too minuscule for me, too zoomed in. And I don't want that. I want to zoom out a little bit more. And that's also where you get things like, okay, one die roll, 1d20 roll is a single sword swing, so it only does, I don't know, 1d8 damage. And then you try to whittle down HP bit by bit over the course of an hour or two. And that's that's not the point, right? The whole point of the combat system is so that players can quickly understand that it is very dangerous. But because it's dangerous, I don't want players to resort to it. And because I don't want players to resort to it, it means they'll probably not use it very often. And then I don't need to waste a lot of time designing a very complex combat system, right? If I can manage the combat system with checks that mimic normal resolution checks, I'll take that. All right, what else do we have? No HP. Yeah, nothing inherently wrong with HP. Every system to oh my goodness, I am sorry. You can hear my throat is still not used to this kind of activity right now. Like every kind of system to simulate wounds or injury or anything like that is by necessity an abstraction. And HP is just the most popular one. Every system has pros and cons. Every system can be expanded um, to include more information and more bookkeeping, etc. I just think HP is not what I'm going for here, and this was mainly because I already had some ideas. Right, the twofold system of endurance plus wounds, and then yeah, only D6 because I enjoy that as a personal challenge. Only design with D6, also to make the game more accessible. Right, I like the idea of only having a simple die type, the most common one, and then players immediately know what to do with it. All right, and then we have more ideas over here. So, what do I need? I need stats for characters, but this can come very late, right? I need some sort of core resolution mechanic. I've gone through some of them last time. I'm thinking of something new again. This is my problem when designing. I can never settle down on something. A background. Characters need some sort of background. And a quick and simple one. So the idea is that player characters can die, and they probably will die. Right? So if you go through multiple characters, each one having a written background, it can become tedious because it's like, oh, this person is only going to survive half the session anyway. No need to write up a huge background, come up with all of these things. You can, of course, but it's a huge expenditure of mental energy that won't see a lot of result in play. Right? So background needs a quick generator, right? That you roll on as part of character generation. Quick generator that influences the PCs now. So what this means is the PC's current state, so their skills or equipment or things like that can be influenced by the background generator. Right? So instead of you going, okay, background is one thing, and then I pick a class, and then independent of background. So independent of background, I pick a class. Independent of class, I pick some skills. Independent of skills, I pick some equipment, and so on and so forth. Instead of all of these being disparate, like individual systems that, and the only thing that ties them together is they all happen to be on the same character, right? Have all of these things connected. The background determines your skills. The background determines your equipment. The background determines, like, I'm not going to have classes, but it determines what you can do in a way, right? Um, so yeah, that's what I want. So the background generator is the character generator. in a sense. And uh and hits hold on, hits a few actionable highlights. Right. So this will becomes a bit clearer once we delve into settings, because this is also tied to settings. Um, there is a setting that can work with OSR very, very well, and that is called the West Marches kind of setting. West Marches is a a style of gaming, and the whole of West Marches is a bit more expansive. But essentially, what it means is you have this area on in your world called the West Marches. Or it's called that because in the original campaign that popularized it, this concept, uh, it was the West Marches, and it's basically unexplored border, not even borderlands, just the unexplored wild out there. No one knows what's there, and then sorry, all you have is you have a town, right? A single town. Further east to the town is the Empire or the homeland, right? Boring, static, um, maybe even stifling in some way, right? And then on the very border to the West Marches, you have this town that just has it's just an adventuring town, right? It has a couple of shops, it has a tavern and an inn, and like all the good stuff that you need for some adventurers to be happy. And then west of that, you have the Marches, big unexplored lands with who knows what in there. And the idea is that the PCs are adventurers coming to this border town that for whatever reason, either they want to seek riches in the Marches, or uh, they are a criminal back in the Empire, and this is either their punishment or their way to flee or whatever, any sort of reason. And then they come here and they go out into West Marches and explore, right? And that's the basic idea. So this whole, why are the PCs here in this town, and why are they willing to risk their life to go out and explore this complete wilderness that no one knows what's there, right? And no one will remember that they did this, basically. Like, you cannot gain any fame going out into the West Marches because no one really cares about the West Marches, right? They're too big, too dangerous, too wild, right? And you're just one person. The marches are vast and imposing and dangerous, and you cannot hope to conquer them on your own. Right? You can discover maybe a dungeon or two, or a single piece of lore, and be like, "Yay, that was my mark, hooray!" And but you're not gonna get famous from it, right? Why are you there? And a background generator can hit these highlights. Things like, uh, who are you when you grew up, right? And then what happened in your life that you are now here in the West Marches? Maybe one thing in between, right? To establish something, kind of skills and such. That is one way to do it, and that's what I mean with it hits a few actionable highlights of like, oh yeah, okay, my character is indeed a criminal, a dangerous criminal, and ran away from justice to the West Marches. That's gonna play a bit differently than, oh, my character came here because I want to seek forgotten lore, right? It's not gonna make a huge difference, but it gives every player like just that bit of anchoring to get a bit into their character, and that's all you need, right? You don't need much more to kind of get into the mindset of your character a bit more and play them at the table. If you want more, you can always write more, of course. No one's stopping you. But if you're saying, yeah, well, this character is probably going to die in a session or two, maybe, the West Marches are dangerous, and let's not get too attached. Then yeah, that's like, yeah, okay, I don't know, roll a bit. Okay, mage's apprentice, and to impress their master, my character is out here looking for some forgotten tomes of magic. Done. Boom. Finished. Right? And that's all you need. And that took you like 5 minutes rolling up. Um and then your character is done, basically. So that's what I mean with background generator being a character generator. All right. So then we have inventory, also part of background. Personal goal, also part of background, very likely. Even the stats could be part of the background, right? Could all be generated through the background. Um, Health and injury, that's a big one. And then here are the adventuring systems, right? So dungeon crawl, wilderness travel, downtime, crafting, repairing, strongholds, traps, social systems, combat, GM systems for prepping and running the game, and so on and so forth. So these are the big ones. Oh, hey! Oh my goodness! Jess, it's been so long. Wow, how are you doing? Thank you for the redeem. Oh, it's nice to see you. How goes it? I need to turn on some light. Managing being swamped with work and just anxiety. Oh, yeah, I feel that. Being swamped with work is no fun. But yeah, it's great to have you here. Um, yeah. So you're very welcome to just stay and look at some RPG design. I don't know. Do you play? I kind of forgot. I think you do. Um, but I'm maybe getting things mixed up. Um, on another note, though, I see that ads are going to start soon. In the middle of a Strixhaven game. Ooh, that sounds exciting. Yeah, Strixhaven is also a setting that's like that seems uh, so intricate. Play every Tuesday? Nice. But I need to play again. I haven't played in so long. This last year has been hell on my schedule and on my general ability to do things regularly. But yeah, that's nice. That's very nice. After I finish Strixhaven, I'm going to BM Witchlight. Witchlight. Is that a game or is that a setting? I may have heard of that before, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I do see that ads are starting soon, so I will continue with my breakfast real quick while that is going on, and then we will continue with the designing. I'm eating onigiri because that is breakfast food here. Hooray! Mm, yeah, not being able to hear the music through my browser is a bit. The Carnival module thing for D&D, Wild Beyond the Witchlight or something like that. Oh, okay, then I haven't heard of that.
Endure.
Or
In enduring, grow strong.
Mm. Oof, okay. Eating a single niggity in 90 seconds challenge failed. Mm. You get to journey in the Feywild. It's the book that introduced the Harengon race, the slave race thing, the Hazodi, that one. The one where they really did not think the rabbit people. Then I'm not 100% sure about that one. I didn't even know that book existed, so I'll have to see. So to be fair, I'm not big on official D&D modules. See if I can find a link to send you a tour. Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. Hmm. No, I haven't really run any official things, and also I don't run or play D&D in general. So I haven't really looked into many of the modules. Like I know some names here and there. I know like um, Ravenloft, Strahd. The Strahd one was very popular. I like the Feywild. I figured my first time being way better with the guidelines. I have something to learn from when I make my own campaign. Yeah, definitely. So also, word of advice: just because it's officially published doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Like, that's too general of a term. But like there are many mistakes in officially published modules. So just a friendly warning from there. Don't take it as canon just because it's in a published book. Biggest thing to look out for is a lot of these published books are written with readers in mind, not game masters. Right, people who read the adventure rather than people who want to run the adventure. So just keep that in mind, and maybe it will make your prep easier when you do decide to go through it. Mm, I've been told by some coworkers who played in which I wasn't the best received, but I can improve off it if anything. World building, making things up from a page. Yeah, definitely. And if you just use it as like inspirational material or things to fall back on, then yeah, definitely. It can definitely help. It's like it's another thing I could talk about on here, not just designing a game system, but like designing adventures or things to watch out for when designing adventures. Um Not this time. This time we need to continue with this system. Uh where was I? Right, we just finished talking about this part. Um and then I wanted this. Let me write down some notes. This is why keeping extensive notes is good. I have so many notebooks filled, like handwritten notebooks filled with game ideas and descriptions and explorations of mechanics and such. I have two of them on my desk right now because I thought I had some ideas for this particular game in there. Turns out no. Dozens of other games, but not this one. So, note keeping, very important. So, yeah, Strixhaven has a unique system that I absolutely adore when it comes to NPCs that are a large part of your interactive cast. Ooh, okay. Then I'll have to look into that. I mean, that's another big thing, though. A good thing, hopefully, is that you can have these systems, these adventuring systems in adventures. I just realized what I said. You have an adventuring system inside an adventure, but essentially, you don't need every single of these systems in every single game that you play. Right? Some adventures need specific systems for that particular adventure. And a good adventure will then design and introduce such a system to you to help make running and prepping the adventure easier. So, like some adventures might involve a lot of overland travel, and then you better have a good overland travel system in there. Be that hex crawling, be that path crawling, be that something else, right? That helps. Then that's really really good, right? Or if you have a lot of social interactions, then you can introduce some sort of framework for social systems in there. Or uh, what is it? There was an entire setting back in the 90s, I believe, called Birthright, a D&D setting, in which the player characters, are all rulers of their respective kingdoms. And so the much of the rules of Birthright, much of the material of Birthright was systems on building, maintaining, running domains and strongholds and such. Um, and you don't need that. That's not generic enough to have it in every possible game, but in something like Birthright, where that is a central focus of the game, yeah, that is very good and necessary. The relationship system, depending on the positive and negative points you gain, you either get a boon or a bane. Boon gives you slight advantage, while bane gives you slight disadvantage, annoyance, and it's different for every NPC. One NPC has a bane of being booed during any performance. One of your players has a -6 point balance with his NPC. To activate boon bane, you need +2 minus. Aha! Okay. So a relationship system with different NPCs, and then you build relationships, and then that actually influences gameplay. Well, not just gameplay, but like the narrative further down the line. I like that. Right? And seeing as how Strixhaven is like a magical school where you need to get along or not get along with your fellow students and teachers and everything, I can totally see how such a system would be very important. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean, right? You need, if you're got boons with 3 NPCs, nice. And, and this is another thing that such systems do. If such a system exists in the game, you will naturally play toward it because it is something tangible you can grasp. Right? If a game has a system for strongholds, players are likely to want to build a stronghold. If you have something for crafting and repairing, well, guess what? Then crafting and repairing suddenly becomes an enticing activity to do in the game. Right? So I can imagine collecting boons and banes and such with the various NPCs and playing toward that can be a big part of Strixhaven, simply because this system exists. So yeah, adventuring systems, very, very important. Very good segue. um, But you have these adventuring systems, and the big thing here is something to keep in mind with these is you. So how do I put this? Various adventuring systems, they are every system in a role playing game is by necessity an abstraction, right? To some degree. Um, an abstraction of let's call it reality, right? The reality of the particular world the game is set in. Right? So um every system, right? Whether checking if you succeed on a task, uh, injuries, anything like crafting, social systems, even combat, right? They are all by necessity some sort of abstraction. And so there are two general axes. There are probably more that you can have. Let me start down here, which is um, the level of abstraction, right? So you can have highly abstract on one end, and on the other you can have something like physics engine almost, right? And by the way, this is the whole it's not realistic trap to fall into. Realism, the pursuit of realism is not should not be the only and the highest goal in game design. You're designing a game, you're not designing a physics engine, right? Um, but then there's a different axis, which is specific on one end. Oh my goodness. Specific and not generic, but on the other end, but what's the word I'm looking for? Unified is a better word. Unified. Depending on the players who will be participating, I feel like you may end up leaning more in favor to a bit to certain systems over others. Keep their interest pull further, but you'll be a more generalized group versus something anyone can build off for any group. Um, yeah, of course. It always depends on the players and what they are interested in, right? And sometimes you get a system in a game and players will just not respond. Like you hear plenty of stories of people saying, "Oh yeah, we played an entire session of D&D and we didn't pick up the dice even once." Right? So that means D&D gives you a lot of, well, it doesn't give you a lot of different systems. It gives you like one or two basically. But even that, right? D&D has two systems essentially. It has combat and character advancement. And you're not even doing that, right? You're playing a game with two systems and you're not even touching those two systems, the two core systems in the game. And you're still playing. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Playing is supposed to be fun. Play whatever is fun for you. But yes, it heavily that's an extreme example, but yes, it definitely very much it depends on the players, on the group, um on what they are interested in. Maybe you have a really cool stronghold system in the game, and all the players are like, you know what, screw that, we just want to walk around and such. Is that okay? Sure. Um, yeah, those are definitely also extremes. May 17s can lean heavily into roleplay with minimal combat, or major dungeon crawling, minimal roleplay character development. Yep. Yes, and finding the balance. That is the biggest thing. That is why session zeros are so important. Session zeros are to make sure you get everyone's expectations. Right? What are you looking for in this game? What is fun for you? And some people might say, yeah, no, I really enjoy the tactical combat part. I really enjoy pushing numbers around and getting advantages in combat and such. And it's like, okay, yeah, sure. That is very, very fun. Tactical combat can be very fun. But then you must also see, okay, if someone else is like, oh, I want deep emotional stories and connections with NPCs, those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Then you have to be aware that they will have to split the spotlight time, whatever that term is, right? Um, and such. So you need to be aware that this is a thing. Um, so yeah, it's about getting all of these different expectations and different ideas. Screen time, thank you. Different ideas of what is fun and different things people are looking for in the game, and put them all together. Right? And sometimes you get people who just do not fit because the thing they're looking for, the fun they want to have, is so different that you just can't reconcile them. And that sometimes happens, right? Humans are complex. But that's what session 0 is for. Finding out what people find fun and trying to craft something together that either everyone can find fun or that everyone gets a bit of their fun. Okay. But systems and definitely can draw player attention. If a system is there and it ties into, and this is the other axis that I wanted to talk about, it ties into the core game somehow, then players will engage with it because playing with that system is playing the game. So the abstract and physics engine axis, I think, is relatively clear, right? If you have some sort of, say, overland travel system, then you can have extremely complex tables of like, oh, what is the exact terrain type you're walking through? How is that going to affect your travel speed? If you walk across grasslands, right, that is going to be easier than walking across rocky hills, and that's going to be even more easier than walking across a swamp and things like that. And you can have very exact modifiers for the exact changes in travel time or like endurance loss. Like, oh, if you walk through a swamp, it's going to cost you a lot more energy, and you're going to tire out a lot faster. Swamp, oh no, PTSD from swamp maps. Yeah, definitely. Right. And then things like, oh, how much sleep do you track? How much food and water do you track? Do you track the weather? How exactly do you track the weather? Does every terrain type and biome have its own weather table? And then you roll, and depending on what the current weather is, that determines what the next type of weather can be, right? So if you have a clear day, does it suddenly swing into storm, or does it go to cloudy day, light rain, heavy rain, storm, or what happens, right? How does the weather affect you? If you get cold because it's rainy or snowy, does that affect how fast you can travel, etc.? There's a lot of things that you can put in there to emulate the quote unquote reality of something like overland travel. And that is this axis, right? The physics engine axis on one side, and then the abstraction on the other side, where you say, we don't need to track all of these things, right? And we can just have very broad categories of like easy to travel terrain and hard to travel terrain, right? Grasslands, plains, hills are easy to travel. Mountains and swamps and such heavy forests are hard to travel. Done. That's all we need, right? Weather, we can have clear weather or we can have detrimental weather, right? And we only track food like once a day. So for every day you travel, you cross out one ration, done. Right? So you can have very, very simple, highly abstracted things. And there is no right or wrong answer on this axis, right? Fun is a big part. Some people really enjoy physics engines. Just look at old war games. Holy heck, old war games are so complex. Um, that you can spend like 10 hours playing a single match of a war game. Um, and people will really get into it because it's like, okay, if I have my squad walk up that hill, then they get a bonus. But walking up that hill, Civ 3 is simple by comparison, right? It's like if I have my squad walk up this hill, they get a better position. So if they have to fight, they get a bonus on their rolls. But walking up that hill costs some endurance, and that means they're no longer as fresh as if they were to walk just along the flatland, and then and so on. It's like, oh my goodness, some old, like especially World War II themed war games and such. The old where you have huge printed out hex maps, and then like every player is dealing with like 200, 300 cardboard chits that they move around and like have throw like 40 dice and things like that. It's wild. It's wild, and the rule books are 300 pages and such. That is very heavy into the physics engine part, but there are people who really love that, right? Who really want to go through every minute detail because it helps them get into the game, and it can be a lot of fun, like optimizing like that. On the other hand, abstraction can also be a lot of fun, right? Because you just want to get some sort of result. You just want some sort of framework to have meaningful decisions, to give you clear consequences for your meaningful decisions, and then you just roll a couple dice or make a couple simple decisions and continue. And it's also, what is the focus? Right? Is overland travel a huge part of the game? Well, if it is a huge part of the game, then you probably want a couple more factors and choices in there. It's also like in D&D, combat is a huge part of the game because the combat system is so detailed. Right? It gives you a lot of different choices within itself, and meaningful, mechanically defined and codified choices. Right? It's like if you walk over here, you get a different set of bonuses than if you walk over there. And you can choose what kind of bonuses you want based on the exact actions you want to do. Like, do you want to do a ranged attack? Do you want to do a melee attack? What kind of a melee attack do you want to do? What weapon are you using? And so on and so forth. And all of these different small choices make combat more complex, give you more tactics, more meaningful decisions and such. And um, and that is necessary because combat is so central and reoccurs so often. Like if you go from level 1, even from level 1 to level 5, you're likely going to have like what, 10 to 20 combat encounters, something like that. Right? And imagine your 20 combat encounters all just being, oh, I roll a die and done, and I don't have any other choices. That would be really, really boring really quickly. By giving you all of these choices and by having like 90% of all abilities and other effects in the game be tied to combat, it gives you more choice. So it very much depends on how big of a system, how big of a focus this system has in the game, that determines where you should err on this axis as a designer. Um, right, so abstract versus physics engine. Now the other axis is something we don't think about too much because, firstly, because many games nowadays don't have a lot of different systems. They typically have one or two, right? Combat and then some other system. And if you have two systems, this axis doesn't really come into effect. So what do I mean by this? Specific versus unified. Essentially, how uh, idiosyncratic, how individual is each system. An example from older D&D, right? The old systems of D&D from the 70s and some 80s and such, they had completely different systems for completely different situations. For example, if you wanted to run away, evade and run away from monsters in a dungeon, you used one system. If you wanted to evade and run away from monsters on the wilderness, you used a different system, right? If you wanted to, uh, what else is there? Okay, I'm not gonna into that. I'm gonna go with more generic examples because I don't know old D&D that well, so I don't want to just spew misinformation. But things like, oh, if you are searching for a trap in a room, you use one system. If you are searching for a clue in a room, you are using a different system, right? And these systems can be highly specific. There is a game out there called Fantasy Craft that does exactly this. It has a lot of different subsystems for various tasks and things you can encounter in an adventure. But all of these systems are like their own little isolated game that has nothing to do with any other systems and has nothing to do with the core system, right? Um, Thief abilities in old D&D, right? So old D&D had the whole in combat, right? You roll a d20 to see if you hit. So this check is a d20 versus some target number. If you are a thief and you wanted to pick a lock, you instead rolled a d percentile and check against a difficulty, right? So you're using completely different dice for something that in our modern understanding is just I try to perform this task. But if the task is hitting someone with a sword or picking a lock, you use two completely different systems that have nothing to do with each other. Right? And that's what I mean with specific versus unified. Ads are going to start again, so I will continue explaining that afterwards. But I hope that example is kind of starting to clear it up. I have more breakfast to eat. Well, we don't really see this nowadays. Mm, Mainly because of how it's become an unexamined default nowadays. This not so much. Right, abstract versus physics engine not so much, but the unified versus specific axis has become an unexamined default that we just
Endure.
do.
In enduring, grow strong.
But I am feeling my throat a bit. Hopefully, talking a bit more is going to um not murder my throat, but instead do the opposite, where I can warm it up and then it becomes a bit better. But if it gets too much, if my throat starts killing me, I will have to end. I'm not 100% recovered yet. Um, So we'll have to see how this goes. All right. So yeah, what I was talking about. So this has become an unexamined standard where we are pretty far up in up here, basically, right? And this has become the go-to, and we're not even aware that we're doing this most of the time, right? Especially not if we don't design games. If you're just playing games and such, this is very much what you see, and this is what you just take over without examining it. Um, so to return to the example of the thief abilities in older D&D, um, right? So in modern D&D, starting with third edition, they unified all of these different task resolution systems. And they're not the first game to do that. Call of Cthulhu already had a pretty unified skill system where all tasks are just checked on different skills, but all the skills run on more or less the same basic resolution system. And in third edition D&D, that was also adopted. So in starting third edition D&D, right, if you want to hit someone with a sword, you roll a d20, get some bonuses, and check against the difficulty number. If you want to pick a lock, you roll a d20, add some modifiers, check against the difficulty number. If you want to persuade someone, you roll a d20, add some modifiers, and then check against a difficulty number. This is especially true in 5th edition, right? In older D&D, each of these actions had a completely different thing. So if you wanted to attack someone, you roll a d20, and then, or you first calculate your difficulty number based on the various modifiers of your attack and the enemy's armor class. You roll a d20, and then you check if you beat the difficulty or not. Right? If you wanted to pick a lock, only a thief could pick a lock. If you're not a thief, forget about it. Right? If you're a thief, you look at your special thief abilities, your thief skills, and then you have pick lock as one of them, which has a percentage value. And then you roll. You might modify the percentage value based on the difficulty of the lock. And then you roll a percentage die and check if you beat that value. Right? And if you want to persuade someone, the GM first rolls on the reaction table to see what the general attitude of that person is. And then maybe at some point you get a charisma check. Right? So you just kind of roll and see if you are above or below your charisma. And that's how these systems work. So all three systems were completely different based on the type of task you wanted to do. And this difference is still minor. You can go much deeper than this, right? So that's what I mean. So these systems were very specific and they were not unified, right? They were down here on the specific side of this axis. And that's sort of not the standard anymore. Right? The standard is try to make everything with the same type of check. And there are definitely advantages to that, right? One advantage being that you don't have to learn a lot of different systems. You just look at one thing. You learn, like in D&D, you learn, okay, roll d20, add modifiers, check against difficulty. And once you know that, you can apply it to most situations and subsystems in the game. Right. And if you have a situation where you feel you need a subsystem, but the game isn't giving you one, it's relatively easy to come up with something to adjudicate this particular situation. You just take the basic resolution system. That's why we have something called a core resolution mechanic. This is new. Core resolution mechanics are new. Right? Older games didn't have that because they had all of these different isolated systems. But you just take the core resolution mechanic. You say, okay, let's put on this kind of modifier, or let's say we need to add this extra bit of ruling, and then you roll, and then you could interpret the result and continue with the play. And that is good, because it lowers the initial buy-in. Oh my god, hold on, my nose is completely stuffed right now. Ugh. Oy. I just used 6 tissues. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'll have to see how long I can continue this. um. So yeah, unified versus specific. So nowadays we have a lot of unified because it lowers the learning threshold for players and GMs, and the usability threshold in a lot of ways, right? Um, you only have to learn 1 or 2 steps or so, and then you can just apply those to whatever might occur in the game. And there are entire games that run on just a single core resolution mechanic and nothing else, right? Um, and then there is value in looking at, okay, how can we maybe make things a bit more specific? Um, and tweak a certain system to have a couple more individual modifiers and individual systems, but that small cost, it's all a balancing act, right? It's like, does this cost of learning and running the system increase the enjoyment you'll get from it, right? I'm now thinking maybe I just didn't label these well enough, or maybe there's a third axis I just thought of. Uh, there's probably a better way to label these to reduce it down to back to 2, because I feel like there is a way to do this. So what I mean by this is, let me put the labels: isolated versus integrated. What do I mean by this? So once you look at all of these, they are all very much related. So that's why I think there is a way to reduce this to maybe just 2 axes. So isolated, integrated. What I mean by this is how much they affect the core game, right? Versus how much you're just playing within this system on its own, and then once you're done with it, you put it aside and And that's it. It doesn't touch any other parts of the game. Right? So if uh so in D&D, I don't know how many people know this, but D&D has an exhaustion system. Right? There is an exhaustion system in D&D. It's kind of on a sidebar somewhere tucked away in some rules. Um, and so on, but there is an exhaustion system in D&D that is separate from the hit point system and other conditions and such. Why do you have the exhaustion system? The exhaustion system is its own isolated little way of generating consequences for very specific circumstances. I am not 100% sure what those circumstances are, but I believe it's things like not getting sleep, not getting food, very specific effects, environmental effects. I believe disease and such can cause exhaustion as well. Right? Um, so it's this very isolated system. It's like, okay, we do have systems of tracking not getting sleep, not getting food, getting sick, etc., etc. But the consequences they give you are also just within this system, right? In its own isolated little bubble. And sure, once you get levels of exhaustion, that spills over into other systems. But that's kind of like you are playing a whole mini game inside this little exhaustion bubble. And then once you're done, you just take, okay, I get -2 on rolls, or I get, there's no more -2 on rolls. Yeah, I get disadvantage on certain rolls. Boom. And then you take that, and then you promptly forget about it. Because the entire system is very, very isolated and doesn't touch other parts of the game, right? Like, it requires you to enter this bubble on your own accord. There is nothing that leads you into it. There is no system that leads you into this little bubble. It's like, oh, we have to care about sleep and food and disease, right? But there is nothing else in the game that references these things. You have to, on your own, want to play with these systems and then enter this bubble. And then you play around in that bubble, tracking food and sleep and accruing exhaustion. And then once you're done, you exit the bubble and basically leave everything behind in there. Right? That's what I mean with isolated. And that just makes it so that people forget that system exists and then don't want to engage with it because it doesn't actually touch anything else of the game, neither pulling you into the system nor when you come back out of it. Right? And integrated means the system hooks into other systems, preferably some form of the core system, right? So that's why in D&D there are so many systems that affect hit points. A lot of systems deal with some form of manipulating hit points or manipulating the way you gain or lose hit points or manipulating how well you can reduce other people's hit points or how well you can protect your own hit points and so on and so forth, because hit points are the core mechanic of D&D. So a lot of systems hook into hit points because then you will care about them, right? If something is there that can reduce your hit points, you will care about it because you care about your hit points. And so on. So that's what I mean with integrated, right? A lot of spells and so on deal with that. So then you start caring about those spells. And spells that don't deal with that are a lot more difficult to kind of make interesting or integrate into the game because they don't mechanically tie into the core conceit. Um, so that's this axis. And where you position yourself on these determines how your system will look. And you can position yourself differently for every system you're trying to do. Right? That's the freedom of designing something. But the most important thing is to be aware that these axes exist and to know what it is you are doing. Don't just take things as unexamined defaults. Don't just say things have always been done this way. Oh, these big games do it this way, so I'll do it this way. Or even just take over these things and don't even realize that's what you're doing, right? Be aware of what's happening. Be aware of the different ways you can craft these systems. And even if you choose, oh yeah, I want a somewhat abstracted, unified, and integrated system like most games do, make that a conscious choice. Right? Don't just do it because you've played with systems like that for so long that you just unconsciously think that's how games work. That's just how it is. Right? That's unexamined design and not really great because then you just don't think of a lot of possibilities that you can do. Or you might take over bad things and not realize that you're taking over bad things, or unfitting things is probably a better word. And then you have systems that don't fit the thing you're trying to craft them for, but you don't know why, because when the premises you started out with, you just kind of unconsciously had these biases and just kind of don't even know what you're really doing, right? So this is all taking a step back and looking at not just what are systems, but how do we think about systems? How should we look at systems and really break them apart and see how do they fit into a wider game, right? And this is where you get, like, there were a lot of ways this was experimented with, right? Where you get role-playing games that had like, oh, to like for some actions you just literally play a game of poker or so, right? And then you play this game of poker and then you come back and then you forgot what you were actually trying to do, right? But that's essentially saying, all right, what am I doing here? And I don't think people who designed that really realized that they were creating a very isolated and specific system that is also so highly abstracted that it has nothing to do with what you were trying to do. It's like, I want to pick a lock. Okay, play a game of poker against the lock. It's like, what? Right, that's the resolution system of the game. Okay, and then you play a game of poker, and then so you need to learn how poker works. You need to become good at poker or some other game, whatever. And then you come out of it and you go, okay, so all of these decisions I made in the poker game are not actually important at all, right? Because I'm just trying to pick a lock here, and then if a game of poker takes half an hour and you come out, it's like, wait, what was I trying to do? What are we doing? Let's just continue playing poker, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Right? Trying to innovate without understanding what you're innovating on is also a danger, and I've seen this happen. Um, all the way back when indie RPGs first started becoming a thing, and people were just going crazy with innovating all sorts of things, and that's good, right? Innovation is what drives the hobby. But that was 20 years ago, right? Now, today, we have the benefit of hindsight. We have the benefit of a lot of examples, and we have the benefit of being able to analyze all of these things and look at, all right, I need to think about what I'm actually doing when I am designing these systems. All right, so core mechanic, not the core mechanics. Okay, so core mechanic. The core mechanic in the game is going to be endurance. So every character has an endurance score. And by the way, this is not new. Other games have done this. The game I stole this from is called The One Ring, which is a really interesting game based on the Lord of the Rings by Free League. And they have some really good ideas in there. And this is where I stole this from, kind of, and I adapted it. So, endurance score. You have a score, and this score determines two things, right? First, it's your hit points, right? Your endurance acts like your hit points. If you lose endurance, your character becomes weaker. If you're out of endurance, I don't know, you die or you fall unconscious or whatever. Not important, but you're out, right? And it's your item slots. So if you have an endurance score of 10, that means you can carry 10 items. If you then get hit by a sword and lose 5 endurance, well, guess what? You can only carry 5 items now. There might be some leeway, like the One Ring does a thing where you can carry more than your endurance score allows. But if you do that, you become weakened. You get this special condition. I'm not sure if they call it weakened or not. But same idea, right? So if you carry too much and you get hit and you lose some endurance, then you have to say, all right, do I drop some of my gear? Or do I take this condition, because this condition when it does it makes all of your dice rolls more difficult, quite a bit. And that's a choice, right? So that's why you also get actions in combat, like take off your helmet. A helmet is a really good protective tool, but it also costs you a lot of encumbrance. So if you get hit in combat, then you can be like, oof, okay, let me take off my helmet so that I'm underneath my encumbrance limit. Now I'm less protected in combat. So that is a choice. That is a meaningful choice generated by the system. And I love things like that. Or let me drop my shield. Same idea, right? So I might want to implement something like this, where if you are above your endurance score in items, you become weakened in some sort, and that gives you hefty penalties. So you don't want to be there, but you can probably afford to be there for a little bit, and then hope to recover some endurance and continue on adventuring. Right. So and then the core resolution mechanic. I wanted a d6 dice pool, and I want this 3 result thing. This is the failing forward part, where you get a full success, partial success or success with cost, and failure with consequences. And this with consequences part, right, or with cost part, this is failing forward. Right. This is the part that means you don't get a null result of nothing happens. That's the most boring thing. you can have in a game, and instead you get something happens, something bad. Um, and these are just three different dice systems, resolution mechanics that work like this. Okay, so what I want. Let me grab the three colors. Um, what I want to look at today, an hour and a half after starting, is a possible resolution mechanic that is not quite this, maybe, and some of the systems and how to integrate them. All right, so the core resolution mechanic. That's a horrible line. Slightly better. Okay. So first, let's go through again what I want this to do. So I want graded success plus failing forward. I want this to be modify. How do you spell that? Modifiable to apply to different systems, right? The adventuring systems we were just talking about. Hey yo! Aru Hayes, hello! It's nice to see you here. I'm sorry you jumped in just as ads were about to start. But hello! Hello, it's nice to see you. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. And yeah, welcome. Well, let me see if I can beat out the ads. Nice. Yeah, how goes it? Welcome to my tabletop RPG design session.
Endure.
And
In
ads are playing.
enduring, grow strong.
So I do have to see. Oh, it's not just my throat, it's my nose as well. My nose is really runny right now, but it's running backwards, not forwards, which is a pain. So yeah, having trouble breathing, having trouble speaking, it's not ideal for a streamer. So I do have to see um if it gets really bad, I will have to stop because I just can't talk anymore. Okay. Ads should be over. Welcome back, everyone. But yeah. Hello, Haru. Nice to see you. Finally. So to speak. Um, you guys haven't seen one of your streams yet, so as I drop in a lurk. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. So yeah, and if you're interested in TTRPGs, then that's a bonus, I guess. You can sit here while I design one of them and talk way too much. Because that's what I do. I ramble. I'm an old boomer on the internet. I ramble. You kids nowadays. Etc. etc. Anyway. But yeah, thank you for the lurk then, and do enjoy. So core resolution mechanic. Yes, I wanted to have greater success in failing forward. Modifiable to apply to different systems, right? The adventuring system we talked about, and also something that I remembered that is something that some games do. Specifically, a game called Maze Rats, which is another very simple OSR style game. And Maze Rats has a very interesting approach to it. So in Maze Rats, let me grab the example. So example, Maze Rats. Right. So how that game works is by a fellow named Ben Milton, one of the big voices in OSR. If you want to learn anything about OSR, I suggest you check out Ben Milton YouTube channel Questing Beast. And very like that's where I learned what the OSR is and how it works and many games in it and so on and so forth. And he designed a game. He designed several games, but one of the games he designed is Maze Rats. And Maze Rats, how the system works is the core resolution mechanic is a 2d6 plus stat, right? So you have like stats range from 0 to 2. Right? So 2d6 plus stat, and it has to be higher or equal to 10. Now, if you know a little bit about statistics, specifically 2d6 statistics, you will know that this. Oh, I got my nose again. Hold up. Okay. You will know that this is not easy to achieve. Right? Rolling a 10, 11, or 12 on 2d6 is not easy to get. There are only. So it's basically a 1 in 6 chance. Right? This is the same as getting a. So same chance as rolling 6 on 1d6, right? Exact same chance. Why doesn't he just do that? Because he has the stats that can shift this probability slightly. And yeah, so that's why he uses 2d6 basically. Also bell curve, etc. But it's the same chance, and getting a 6 on a 1d6 is not a very high chance. 16.2%. 16.2, 16 and 2/3%. Anyway, so that means it's not easy to achieve. And the philosophy behind this is because rolling for something is so difficult to get right, to succeed on, players want to do everything they can to avoid rolling the dice. Rolling the dice is a last resort, right? So, result is players should do everything. Am I suddenly hearing the music twice? All of a sudden, I'm hearing my own browser music. Hey, okay. Doesn't matter. All right. Suddenly it got fixed. I don't know. Right. So players should do everything they can to avoid rolling dice. So this is negative design space. Right. They should instead use their ingenuity, the environment, the tools they have, and so on and so forth to try and solve something before rolling for it. So this prevents. So this is anti stat checking, right? Where players are discouraged from just throwing dice and throwing their character stats at every problem. And that is a very interesting philosophy. Not all OSR games do this. Maze Rats is such a prominent example because it so explicitly states that this is what it's doing. But I'm looking at this and saying, I kind of like this idea. Kind of like this idea because it allows me to do several things. So, what this allows me to do, right, is make. So, how do I phrase this? Uh, it it does two things basically. First point is players will try conventional problem solving first, right? Before moving on to their stats and then just rolling them. And this is something you see in more modern games. Like if you watch D&D sessions, either your own or someone else playing them, you see very often that players literally just throw dice at a problem, right? Like they go into a room and the GM starts describing the room and then they just interrupt the GM by saying, I rolled a 22 on my perception. They will proactively roll their own stats, and stats includes things like skills and such, um, before the GM calls for them, either because it's not necessary or the GM was in the middle of something or the G like and so on and it's essentially the players just looking through all of their skills and stats and such and seeing, okay, I'm trying to solve this problem. How can I solve this problem? And instead of looking at the problem, they look at their stats and see which stat can I throw at this. Can I throw a medicine check at it? Can I throw an athletics check at it? Can I throw something else at it? Right? An investigation check or so. And essentially that turns stats into a laundry list of problem solving. Right? So the players no longer engage with the situation, with the narrative. They instead look at their stats and are just playing their own little game of like, oh, I have this number here. Let me throw the number at the narrative and see what sticks. Right. Um, I want to try and discourage that. Right. So that's what this does. Making roles very difficult to succeed on is what will do that. But what I can also do at the same time is make focused stats matter. Right? Because every now and then the players will want their PCs to solve a problem by stat checking, by rolling some dice. Now, that being said, I can then introduce things like skills, where your chance of succeeding is much better. This is actually something. Can't believe I'm getting to this game. So, another example, and this is the good thing of having played a lot of different games. Right? This is why you should, if you want to design games, if you want to become a game designer, step number one: play lots of games. Play lots and lots and lots of games. Step number one. Step number two: play even more games. Step number three: play these games very consciously, but play more games. Right? That's very important. If you want to design things, play games. Because there is another very fun role-playing game called Everyone is John. And holy heck, Everyone is John is so simple, but so much fun. I can only suggest everyone give it a try. So, very quick rundown of what Everyone is John is. John is a very typical dude living somewhere in, I don't know, suburbia or something. And John is stark raving mad. He has many, many voices in his head that take control at different times throughout the day. And these voices all want John to do certain things. Now, John is a completely incapable man. Anything he tries, he will most likely fail. What the players do is every player plays one of the voices in John's head. And every voice has two things. They have something John is good at and something they want John to do. So it could be things like rob an ATM. And then the skill they're very good at is breaking things or so, right? Or someone could be have a simple goal of drive along the highway, and then they would have the skill to drive or something like that. And how this works is whenever John tries something that he is not trained in, i.e., the voice doesn't have the skill for it, you roll a 1d6, and you need to get 6. But if the voice is skilled in something, you roll a 1d6, and then a 4 plus is a success. That is a huge difference. Right? You can also spend willpower. There's a currency called willpower before the roll to make it easier for every point. So if you spend 1 point of willpower, you need a 5 or 6. If you spend 2 points, you need 4, 5, 6, and so on. Yes, that means you can auto succeed, but willpower is very important because you'd use willpower to try and get control over John. Right? And so a voice is heavily incentivized to only do things that they are skilled in. Right? If a voice is, say, running from the cops, and that voice has driving as a skill, then it's much likely that they'll tell John to get into a car and drive away than to, I don't know, climb a fire escape and try to escape into some building. Because climbing a fire escape they're much more likely to fail that, and driving, they're much more likely to succeed. Right? So this is how you can make stats matter. This is a very simple way where if you try anything, you have a very low chance of success. But if you try something you're skilled in, then you have an even chance of success. And then players are much more likely, oh god, my nose again, to try things they're skilled in. And what this means for this game in particular is where players don't have fitting stats, they will try conventional problem solving. And where they do, they are much more likely to try and roll the dice. And that makes skills very important, right? Because if everything was difficult, then it's like, I could try my skill, but chances of failure are still super high. I don't want to. And then the skills are just kind of sitting there and they don't make you feel good. But if you have certain skills on your character, and then you go, well, if I use this, I'm not guaranteed success, no, but I have a much better chance of success. Then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. Um, and that makes skills feel good, and that also makes different characters different, right? So it's the middle ground between player ingenuity to try problem solving, but also making the character abilities matter to some degree. Am I going to take this system from Everyone is John? Probably not. It's a bit too simplistic. But I want to take this idea, right? That being skilled in something gives you a more even success than being unskilled in something. So that's what I want over there. So disincentivize stat checking. Unskilled stats. That's a horrible way of phrasing this. Oh my goodness. I can write that better. Disincentivize unskilled stat checking. Let's just go with that. Disincentivize unskilled stat checking. But at the same time, make PC skills matter. Right? And that's the balance I was looking for. That's what I was looking for. So how do I do this? How do I do this? So one way to do that is to have something like this, roll a 1d6 and success is only on a 6. That is very visceral. Right? That is very much, players look at that and can very quickly go, oof, those are not good odds. Definitely not good odds. And then what I can do is that skills add dice. Now I want to look at some probabilities first. I'm not going to do that now. Essentially, you can say, right, if I have something like 2d6 and I need to roll a 10 or higher, what are the chances, right? 1 in 6. But if I roll 3d6, keep the two highest, and try to get a 10 or higher, what are the chances there? Right? Or if I roll 1d6 and I have to get a 6, chances are 1 in 6. But if I roll 2d6 and I have to get a 6, what are the chances there? And based on these probabilities, I can pick a system that kind of emulates the curves I want, that kind of emulates the chances I want. Right. So stats give uh, bonus dice. This will also mean that if I do use traditional stats somewhere on a character sheet, most stats will probably be 0 or 1. And that is a way of phrasing. It's either when you check, you roll a die plus 1 die for every point in a stat. Right? That's the one way of phrasing it. Or you can say you pick a stat and roll however many dice you have a number in there. The end result is going to be the same, right? So if I have, I don't know, a strength of 0, and this is really just phrasing, and this is an important part as well. Like, what makes more intuitive sense? What is likely going to cause players to ask fewer questions every single time they roll? Like that is something that will come up, right? Even like you might see that sometimes in D&D as well if you play it a lot, or other games. There will always be players that every single time they roll, they will always go, okay, what die do I roll? What do I add? What do I do? Right? And they have rolled 100 checks already, and every single time they still ask. So that is definitely a thing. So the more you can cut down on the confusion, the better it is for players like that to intuit what to do, right? So it's either something like, if I have a strength of 0, and then the check is 1 die plus strength dice, right? And in this case, the result will be 1d6. Or I can say something like strength 1, and then the check. Oops, I completely misspelled that. Check is just straight up your strength in dice, and the result is still going to be 1d6, right? So it's all just a matter of phrasing it and changing the baseline value, right? It's either you have a 0 in your stat, and you say whenever you make a check, you take 1 die plus 1 die for every point in your stat, or you have a 1 as a baseline in your stat, and when you roll a check, it's just you check your stat and take that many dice. The mathematical end result is the exact same. It's just what feels more intuitive, right? What feels better, so to speak. That is secondary, though, right? This is super easy to change. This you can change all the way at the end when the system is already up and running, and you realize players are confused by the way you phrase things. Change it around slightly and see if players are more or less confused. And that's where playtesting comes in. Okay, stats give bonus dice. And base chances. So this is 1, and base success chance is low. Okay. Now, last time, what I looked at was a Blades in the Dark kind of system, where You get this greatest success of 6 is a success, 4 to 5 is a partial success, and 1 to 3 is a fail. That means, yes, you have a 50% chance of getting some success. But a lot of the time you'll get some sort of consequences. Now, in Blades in the Dark, there is a way to mitigate these consequences. Right? There is a way to do that. And that is one of the core ideas. In fact, that is probably one of the core mechanics in Blades in the Dark. It's the stress mechanic, where whenever you get consequences, you can try to resist those consequences, and it might cost you some stress. But that's the whole point. You're supposed to jump headfirst into danger, look at the consequences, and then try to resist them. And you have a pretty good chance of resisting them if you pick your actions wisely. My game doesn't have that. Doesn't have that consequence resistance thing. So getting any sort of consequences is detrimental. So I'm thinking I can just keep this system, not have the resistance mechanic in there, the mitigation mechanic of mitigating the consequences, and that is going to have the effect of players really thinking about, all right, do I really want those consequences? Because then the choice is no longer between success and failure. The choice is between consequences and no consequences. And based on the numbers, right? So the choice now is choice is not between success and failure so much as it is between consequences versus no consequences. Right? And this is still a 5 out of 6 chance. And this is a 1 out of 6 chance. Right? And I can tweak this. I could even say, if you roll your dice.
Raiding party!
Oh my goodness, Marcus.
Gather your party before venturing forth.
Hi. What were you doing? You were doing Fate Extra. Nice. How did that go? How was that? And yeah, welcome Raiders. Hello. It's nice to see you all. I'm sorry, my health is still a bit beat up. But yeah, hi. Welcome everyone to the stream. My name is Chichin. I'm a Bard VTuber, as you can see, and I do old games and role-playing games, and today I am designing a tabletop role-playing game. Good evening. Tonight was playing more Fate Extra sequel. Just got an English fan patch after 8 years. Oh. Okay. Nice. Oh, so you started Fate Extra a long time ago, and now you finally have the incentive to finish it and check out the sequel. Nice. But yeah, the fact that these games are not translated is such a mystery to me. But very good. I hope you made some good progress toward finishing your run. And I hope you had lots of fun doing so. But yeah. Do you play tabletop? Make your own TTRPG sounds really interesting though. Gonna be lurking, but I'm looking forward to this. Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the lurk, and thanks for the raid. And yeah, if any of you need to go drink, go rest, or go stretch or something, please do take care of yourselves. Otherwise, yeah, you are welcome to lurk. You're welcome to ask questions as well about tabletop role-playing games, about their design, about playing them, etc. So yeah, feel free to participate in this process, I guess. But yeah, we're kind of in the middle of designing this right now. We're designing a old school Renaissance, an OSR type of game, which is very much focusing on player creativity, player problem solving skills, having a more lethal game, having a game where the characters are not heroes but are just normal people in over their heads, going out into the wilderness and braving dangers that they're most likely not going to survive, and so on. So a different style of game than something like modern D&D. In fact, old D&D from the 70s and 80s was much more like this. Um, and then it gradually moved more and more towards heroic fantasy that D&D 5e is today. But OSR has a big revival, has had a revival for a couple of years now, and is now in its golden age, so to speak, with a lot of very talented and skilled designers and GMs and such, very much into the OSR scene, which is why it's called the old school Renaissance, right? It's coming back after 40, 50 years. And yeah, and so this style of game is very interesting. It's very different from things I've played before. So I was thinking of trying my hand at designing one myself because I've looked at many different games, and some of them have a lot of good ideas, or many of them have very good ideas, but none of the games were really like, okay, this scratches the itch. This is the game I was looking for. They all have like, okay, this game, this part I like, and that game, that part I like. The game as a whole, it's like, it doesn't quite scratch the itch. So I'm here designing my own because I design games that I want to play. That's why I became a game designer. I want to play certain games, and those games don't exist. So I was like, all right, do it myself. Um, but yeah, I do see that ads are going to start in a bit. So yeah, sorry, Raiders, that you raided right into an ad, basically. It will give me a chance to finish my breakfast, hopefully, and clear out my nose because my nose has been murdering me this stream. I got COVID last week, and I'm still not 100% in the clear. Still a handful of symptoms. So I'm basically fighting that right now while streaming. So thank you for your patience and understanding if I'm not fully able. Okay. Is it happening? What's going on?
Endure.
Ah.
In enduring, grow strong.
Mm. Yeah, I'm going through so many tissues today. So clear up my nose. Yeah, it turns out my nose is a bigger issue right now than my throat. My throat is still a bit tight, a bit dry, a bit achy. It's holding up okay, though, surprisingly. Didn't think I'd be able to stream this long without trouble. But it's my nose. That's just clogging everything up, and then I cannot breathe, I cannot talk, I cannot anything. It's horrible. Okay. Seems like the ads are over. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Yeah, so the game today is, like I said, an old school type game that should discourage players from just throwing dice and throwing their character stats at problems all the time. And instead, have them try to solve problems using their own creativity, using the environment, using the tools they happen to have packed, which as well, like this is limited in inventory and all of that, so they can't have everything. And um and only check the dice when they are skilled in it, or when they don't see any other way forward, or when they've maneuvered themselves into such a dire situation that they have to try and get out with the dice. So, I was looking at resolution mechanics, as in how to do the whole dice roll thing, and I really like the idea of failing forward. Failing forward meaning if you, like in D&D, D&D does not have failing forward. In D&D, if you roll a check, you either succeed and you proceed with your planned action, with your plan, essentially, with what you wanted to do, or you fail and then nothing happens, and then you have to find a new way to approach the problem or get around it or try a different thing, whatever. And this null result of nothing happens is boring. It's so boring. And I don't like that. So what I want is failing forward. When you fail a check, when you succeed a check, you get what you wanted, and you proceed as planned. When you fail a check, you get consequences, negative consequences. Something bad happens. So when you roll your dice, something will always happen. Either something good, you get what you want, or something bad, the situation gets worse or gets more complicated somehow. And generally, you get that in a sort of three-tiered system, right? When you roll your dice, you get, on the best results, you get, one moment, please. Sorry about that. My mom forgot her keys. I have to let her in. Um, where was I? Right. So you tend to have a three-tiered system in results when you roll a check. Best result is just a full success. You get what you want. Worst result is failure plus consequences. And then there's also a medium result where you get success with the cost. So you get success, but you also get the consequences. Right? So that's a success with cost, as the name implies. So this is a system that many games use. Powered by the Apocalypse is a very famous one, a famous system that uses these. But there are many other systems that do that. Blades in the Dark, Fate, many systems, Don't Rest Your Head as well, and so on, that have this whole dual axis of success, failure, consequence, no consequence, right? And you can get any combination of, well, you cannot get failure, no consequence, because that's again the null result. But basically, success, no consequence, success with consequence, failure with consequence. And that's the system I was looking at. But now I'm looking at this and going, okay, the actual choice here, the actual choice when you're rolling your dice is not between success and failure. The actual choice you're making is consequences versus no consequences. Because that's much bigger. That's much more, it has a much bigger effect. So is it possible to get rid of the success failure dichotomy and just go straight with, if you roll dice, you will succeed, but you need to check if you get consequences or no. And I think that opens up a lot of very interesting choices, because then all of a sudden the players are sitting there going, okay, if I try to solve this myself using the environment and my tools and my creativity and such, I can avoid consequences 100%. But I might not succeed because I might not think of a solution, or I might not have the right tool for the job, or so on, right? So there it's okay. So let me write this down. So the choice here is don't roll, right? And okay, let me put this into a table. That's the best way to visualize this. So the table is going to be like so, and so you have the choice of the players, right? So don't roll, and roll, right? And here you have the uh, success failure, and here you have uh, let me put this differently. Right? Success and consequences. So if you don't roll, you do not get consequences. But success is a maybe. And if you roll, success is yes, but consequences is a maybe. And this is a very clear choice. This is a very clear choice the players can make. What do they value more in this particular instance? Do they value their success? Well, then they'll roll. But then they might risk consequences. Or do they value not getting consequences? Well, then they're encouraged not to roll. But then they might not succeed on the task. This is something I could implement, right, as a choice. This is good to keep in the back of my head right now. I don't need to completely nail down the exact core resolution mechanic. I'm gonna let this stew a little bit, but this is one avenue I can look at. I'm already seeing some flaws with it, right? This is so pros, clear, meaningful choice, right? Of weighing success versus consequences. A con is some systems need failure. So I can already see things like wilderness travel, for instance. If you have a check to get lost, though you could tie that check into just a normal navigational check, and then success means yes, you navigate. Failure means right. So it's like if it's only consequences, no consequences, then the consequences cannot. So the consequences cannot override the success. You must get what you want, and then you have additional bad consequences. So if you're doing something like a navigation check and you succeed on your navigation check or orientation check or whatever during overland travel, it means you find your way. It means you get to where you want to go. And then you cannot have a consequence of, oh, but actually you got lost in the wilderness, right? Because then that overrides the success, and that cannot be. So if I have an orientation check, an orienteering check or navigation check like that for wilderness adventures, overland travel, it needs a failure state, because that would then be you get lost. And then consequences could then be, oh, you lose some of your supplies, or you encounter a wild animal, right? An aggressive wild animal, or something, right? Or you leave lots of trails if you're trying not to leave trails, or the weather goes bad, or anything, right? But I cannot have. I try to find my way. Oh, you succeed in finding your way, and then you also get lost. That doesn't work. Right. So some systems, if I implement checks like that, it's possible I don't implement an orienteering check. I just implement travel checks. Right? So you just roll to travel, and then one of the possible consequences of travel is you get lost. That bypasses the specific test, makes the whole thing a bit more general, and allows for a consequence like that because you succeed in traveling without incidents, would be the success state, the full success state. And then the consequences could be, well, no, you don't succeed in traveling without incidents. You succeed in traveling, but some of your rations spoiled, or you got lost, or you ran into bad weather, or something like that. That is possible, right? But for now, I can see that some systems might need a failure state. Some systems might need a failure state. So if I go with this system here of if you roll, then you always have a success. Yes, it's a clear meaningful. Oh my goodness. Clear, meaningful choice, but it cuts down the available design space I have later on for various systems like overland travel and so on. Something to think about. Still, though, this idea of consequences versus no consequences is something to keep in mind, because then players would want to say, well, screw that, I don't mind the consequences, I'll roll anyway, okay. But then being skilled in something simply reduces the chance of you getting consequences, and that makes skills meaningful, which is what I want, right? Okay. Um, I'm thinking. All right, so this is. I'm also thinking how well I'll be able to design some of these adventuring systems without a clear resolution mechanic. Um, I have some ideas of how I want to tie them together. Um, but I don't know if I should proceed now with these systems without having a clear resolution mechanic. I think I cleared up a lot of different things. Um, on how to think about the systems and how to think about the resolution mechanic, like especially this, that the choice is actually between consequences and no consequences, and not so much failure and non-failure. Because if we use this system of rolling d6, 6 is a success, 4 to 5 is a partial, 1 to 3 is a fail, you have a 50% chance of success. But when players roll, they don't look at that. They look at, oh, I have an 83, 84% chance of consequences, right? And that's the big number that sticks in their minds. I know because I played Blades in the Dark, which uses exactly this system. So failure was kind of an afterthought, and because having more stats and such gives you more dice, failure becomes less and less likely at some point. It just becomes a non-issue. But this partial success, the chance for that gets blown up, and then you're really looking at, do I get any consequences from this? And then the occasional failure throws a wrench into things and makes things more exciting. That's why it's there, but it's not the main focus. The main focus is the consequences and how you deal with them. So making sure that this is the clear choice, I think, is a big step forward. And also making sure that there is no way to mitigate consequences, unlike Blades in the Dark, and that this choice will really matter, and making sure that this whole disincentivizing unskilled stat checking is a thing where, and also making PC skills matter, is a good way to proceed, I believe. Uh, but yeah, I am starting to feel a headache coming on. I've been going for 2.5 hours. Yeah, I think I will call it here. We made some good progress, clarified a lot of things. Oh, I don't want double music. Okay, clarified some things and know how to proceed. So let's see, who can we raid? Ooh, there's something I have not, someone I have not been able to raid at all. Really. So How long has the stream been going? And is he still continuing? Okay, so we are going to raid Professor Bloom, who is another internet boomer who plays a lot of retro games, except he plays them on console. I play them on PC. And he is a font of knowledge for old games and gaming history in general and such. And he loves his golf games. He's a professional singer and he does the VTuber choir. Currently organizing a Christmas choir song for VTuber choirs. So check in on that if you want to see what that's all about. But yeah, let's raid Professor Bloom. Bloom VTuber. Okay. Right. So, thank you all for coming by. Thank you, Marcus, again for the raid. Much appreciated. And I will be back in 2 days with Baldur's Gate. Not Baldur's Gate 3, Baldur's Gate 1, the original. That started everything, right? So we'll return to that. And then on Sunday, possibly V Rising, if we manage to get everyone together. And yeah, I will continue this next week, continue designing this next week. So yeah, thank you all for being here. Take care, and bye-bye.